Hi, I'm Stefan from Mix66 and in this video I want to dive deep into Steven Slate's Trigger 2 plugin. Trigger 2 is one of the most used drum triggering software, but most people just load their samples into it and trigger them, without using the many awesome functions of Trigger 2. By doing so, you miss out on many possibilities to improve your drum sound and hence your whole production. So in this video I want to show you some of the advanced functions of Trigger 2 so that you can improve your productions. But before we jump into it, a quick note from my side. I have seen that 95% of my viewers are not subscribed to this channel. If you want to see more music production tips in the future, then please consider subscribing. Thank you. And now let's jump into Steven Slate's Trigger 2. Okay, so here we have a live recording of myself, some drum recording. We can have a short listen and also a short look at it. Okay, so these recordings are already slightly mixed, so there is some processing on it, but there are no samples, no triggering whatsoever. And we will now take a look at Steven Slate's Trigger 2 and its functions. I want to start with a function which is often overlooked in Trigger, and I'm speaking about the gate function. For that, I will open Trigger on my kick-in track, and we will have a listen to just the kick-in track with no gate inserted. You can hear that there is some long kind of bloomy decay to the kick drum and also some bleed from the snare. If I enable Trigger, turn the mix knob all the way to 0, I can enable the gate, choose attack 0, and now if I play it, you can hear that Trigger gates the kick track very nicely. I also adjusted the release, so now I have a very clean kick signal. In my opinion, this gate function of Steven Slate is one of the best drum gates out there, so I use this a lot when triggering drums. Now let's take a look at sensitivity, retrigger and detail, and I will demonstrate these three functions to you also using the gate of the plugin, because the detection circuit for the opening of the gate or the triggering of the samples is always the same. So whether you use the gate or samples with trigger, the functions of these three knobs are always the same. Now detail is the threshold of the transient detection. This drum recording is recorded very hot, so the preamp is driven, there's almost a clipping on the transients. And to compensate for that, I will turn down the volume by a few dB so that I can demonstrate you the detail better. Let's turn the detail all the way up, so now the threshold is at maximum. And you can hear that only the loudest hits are being recognized by Trigger. Let's turn the detail down. I recommend to turn detail as much down as possible. Then when you are hearing triggers from bleed, then turn it just up a little bit and then you are good to go. Sensitivity is how sensitive trigger is to the transient. You could also think about it as a fine adjustment of the detail. First you set the detail and then with the sensitivity you can make some final adjustments. This is very nice if you want that ghost notes are being detected by trigger or you want that no bleed is being detected by trigger. The retrigger is how fast trigger detects a hit after another hit. So for example, if you have very fast bass drum hits, maybe you have to turn it down, otherwise 15 milliseconds is fine for most applications. So now that you know the gate function and the function of these three knobs, let's take a look at what Trigger is famous for, and that is triggering drum samples. I will add an aux track, name it Kick Trigger, and load the Trigger plugin. Now I will send the kick in to it. Okay, here is the kick in signal. And now with trigger inserted, we can load samples. To browse your samples, choose the browser and you have all your samples in there. A quick note from my side, you can use DCI files or also just plain WAV files. For example, this is just a WAV file which I copied into the sample path of trigger. Okay, now this is a kick sample and we are working on the bass drum. So let's choose a kick sample, another snare sample. I'll choose a kick drum from the Modern Massive library of Get Good Drums GGD. Let's go with the Yamaha Recording Custom. And I will choose the kick direct. If Audition is enabled, then you can hear the sample by clicking on it. In the options, you could also enable that this is always on by default. I recommend to do so. Also, enable instrument loading with double click could save you a bit of time. Once you have your sample selected, you double click and it loads it. Okay, here's the kick direct, and if we hit play, our kick sample is triggered according to the live kick. Now let's take a look at some of the functions down here. We have pan. This of course is to pan the signal from left to right. This is not interesting for kick and snare, maybe for toms where you pan them, but for kick and snare normally you leave them in the center. The next thing is tune, a very important function in my opinion, because with tune you can tune your sample to the live kick. If you tune your sample to the live snare, this can give you a cleaner drum sound, but sometimes you also want to have it not perfectly tuned to the original drum, because then you can create a fatter and larger than live sound. Do this to your liking. For now, I will tune the sample to the live kick. Okay, now it is in tune with the live kick. Here we have the solo and mute button to listen to samples in solo or to mute them, and the phase invert button. Okay, the sample is in phase with the original kick drum, so we don't have to flip the phase. Then down here you would have articulation. When you create a TCI file, then you can add various articulations and then you can select them down here. If you click down here, then you can also trigger the sample. So this is where most of the people stop when using trigger. But you have some more advanced functions that also can improve your drum sound a lot. First of all, let's take a look at the curves. Here you have an envelope, so you can adjust the timings of your kick sample. So let's assume you like your kick sound, you just think that it needs a little bit more attack. In that case, you could adjust the attack, sustain and release settings of trigger so that there's just a short blip of sound that adds just the right attack to your live kick. Let's have a listen to it. Mute the sample. This works also great on snare, so let's do it on snare. Again, a snare, trigger, track, trigger, and send the live snare to it. We will add a snare to it. Let's choose the CLA Didong top. This has a nice crack to it, and if you don't like the sustain from it, go to curves, sustain all the way down and just the release to your liking. Let's listen to it in solo. Perfect. Now we have just the attack of it. Let's listen to it in the drum mix. Let's check the phase. It makes no big difference, so I will leave it like that. And now let's listen to it, and I will mute the snare sample. So if you add these short samples, you can get more attack out of your kick and snare, and of course also drums, without changing the overall tone of your live drums. Let's make an A/B comparison with first these short samples on, and then I will mute them. Your drums will immediately hit harder. You can use this not only for the attack, you could also add room samples to your snare drum and adjust the release to your liking. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's add a snare room sample from GGD. I will go for the copper snare. Let's choose this far room, which is a fairly long room sample. In my opinion, like this, it sounds just too long. So I will turn again the sustain to 0 and adjust the release so that it's just the right length for this groove. So with the release at 0.61 seconds, so more or less half a second, you can hear that there's a short burst of room sound and then it gets out of the way. That way you can create a big sounding mix without it being too cluttered. You could also get rid of the attack of a room sample and make it come in just shortly after the main hit. Also a very nice way to add more depth to your drums. Now let's take a look at the next buttons of Trigger. We have the dynamic button. This is a control of how dynamic your triggering will be. So if it is at 100%, it is linear. Soft hits will have samples with low velocity and loud hits will have samples with high velocity. If I turn this all the way to 0, all the hits will have the same velocity. Let's turn it back to 100, so linear behavior. Velocity is 50 is the default value. Also here you have then a linear behavior of the triggering and you can adjust it to your likings. If I increase the value, softer hits will have a higher velocity sampling, and if I turn it this way, then louder hits will have a lower velocity sampling. And with range, I can limit the velocity range. If it is from 0 to 127, the whole velocity range of a sample library will be triggered. I can adjust it so that the lower volume is higher. For example, if I put it to 127, then each hit will trigger the loudest possible sample. I could also do it the other way around, limit it to, for example, 20. then the maximum velocity of the sample that is triggered will be 20. Let me show you an example how you could use this. I will go to a slower song, to a power ballad. Okay, so I think this sample is a bit too short for a ballad. With ballads, sometimes a nice billowy kick sound is the way to go. So let's create this by using the functions in Trigger. I will add a kick sample. I will choose one of the stock Steven Slate ones. This one already has some kind of billowy sound to it, so I will choose this one. So this is the kick sound with the normal settings, and now I will make some adjustments to it. I want a short, bloomy, kind of billowy sound out of the kick drum. So I will limit the velocity range. I will put the maximum velocity to 30. So the velocity of all the samples that are triggered now is below 30. So I have just samples with a low intensity. You can hear the difference. Now back to 127. Much harder hits, and back to 30 we have softer hits. Now I will make the sound shorter. Turn it up. Maybe it is a bit too loud. Now let's hear the difference. First you will hear this ballad groove with the sample on, and then I will disable it. Now you have a nice big low end, which is perfect for slower pop songs or ballads, to have a nice big kick drum that is not mudding up the lower end. Then next functions here in Trigger, you have all the curve links. So if you enable this, all the attacks are linked together. Same for sustain and for all the other functions as well. Another interesting function is the MIDI capture. Now before we take a look at the MIDI capture function, let's take a look at the standard MIDI settings in Trigger. So you have the MIDI in, you can select the channel and the note. So you can trigger also from MIDI files, which is a normal function for drum triggering plugin. And you have also the MIDI out. So you could record the output on a new MIDI file, so you can turn your audio file into a MIDI file. But in Trigger there's also a faster function. If you clear your buffer and then hit play, now you can drag the MIDI file on the track. It starts at bar 1. Now you have here the MIDI file of your drum track. Now lastly, I want to show you one of the best functions inside Trigger, and this is this button here, suppress. Now sometimes triggering drums can be tricky because in the mic channel of the drum you want to trigger, you have a lot of bleed from another drum. So you have a lot of bad triggering. That is exactly when suppress comes in handy. Let me simulate a drum recording where there is a lot of bleed. I will just create a new track, name it kick with fake bleed. I will copy a kick drum in it and also the snare top mic to simulate some bleed. I will turn down the top mic. Let's listen to it. Okay, that simulates a lot of bleed. I will create the trigger track and see what happens if I just send this track to the aux with trigger on it. I will add a sample. You can hear that also the snare triggers a kick sample. Now let me show you what this suppress can do. Now if you send the signal you want to trigger to the left input of the plugin and the signal you want to suppress triggering from to the right channel, then you can adjust how much trigger should suppress with this knob. Let me show you how this works. First, I will pan the track that I want to be triggered to the left, and I will also send the snare to this aux, but I will pan it to the right. Now suppress is at 100%. Listen to what happens now. You see, with suppress at 100%, the snare doesn't trigger kick samples. This is great when you have a lot of bleed in a drum direct microphone, but the best thing is you could send more signals to the right input of trigger. So let's assume you have only one kick mic on your drum set and there the cable breaks during a recording. So you have no kick direct signal. What you could do then is you create a auxiliary track with trigger on it, send the overhead where the information of all the drum set is in there. You send this to the left channel of trigger and you send all the other direct mics to the right channel. In that way, trigger will trigger only kick samples because you send the rest of the drum kit to the right channel that trigger will suppress. So there you have it. This is an overview of Steven Slate's Trigger 2. And if you would like to have awesome drum samples that you can trigger with this plugin, then just click the link in the description and you can download my drum samples for free. Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button and see you next time. Bye.